The quiet, steady snow blanketed the mountain slopes of Colorado. It was the harsh winter of 1873. It was on this particular day, a December morning, that Buck Calloway's fate took a sharp, completely unexpected turn. He himself had no idea. For 25 years, Buck had been a shadow, a lonely, elusive ghost on the dangerous trails of the Wild West. He appeared and vanished as if he were never there. But the events of that cold day would forever shatter his solitude. Buck, as usual, began his morning in the tiny mountain cabin he had built himself. Outside, darkness still reigned. Coffee was brewing on the stove, and the aroma of frying bacon filled his sanctuary. This was his personal oasis of peace, built far from civilization and its noise. He had fled here from the Texas frontier, where too many people, too many questions, and too many agonizing memories haunted him. He hung up his rifle and placed his large knife on the table, preparing to go out. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to light the fresh snow outside the window. He needed to hurry. Winter forgives no delays, and finding sustenance required tracking the herd of deer he had seen in the western valley. Buck was about to shut the door when he heard a distant sound. At first, he thought it was a wolf's howl, but he quickly realized it was a human voice. Worse, a child's voice. It was unbelievable. The nearest settlement, Redemption Falls, was 40 miles away. No sane settler would risk being here, especially in winter. Buck grabbed his rifle and stepped out into the chilling morning air. The voice came again, closer now. Less than a quarter mile from his cabin, he stumbled upon an unthinkable sight. A solitary wagon with a broken axle was stuck at the edge of the woods. Nearby, a woman was kneeling in the snow. She was wrapped in a tattered blanket. Huddled around her, shaken from the cold, were 3 children. The eldest, a boy about 12, trying to act as a protector, a girl around 8, and the youngest, a tiny, barely 4-year-old child. This was Sarah Jenkins, a widow whose husband had died 2 weeks earlier from pneumonia, never making it to Oregon. Sarah had decided to press on, but they had gotten lost in the mountains and trapped by the snow. They were freezing and starving. For the first time in 25 years, Buck Calloway didn't know what to do. He avoided people, especially families, but standing before him were a mother and children, and if he passed them by, they would surely perish. There was no choice. He led them back to his cabin. The first few days passed in tense silence. Buck was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a thick black beard and eyes that had seen all the evil in this world. His manners were rough, and he avoided contact. He ate in the shed, hunted and set traps, but he never sat at the same table with them. But one evening, everything changed. Buck returned from a hunt and heard children's laughter drifting from inside. Sarah was cooking, and the small house was filled with an aroma it had never known before. Something tightened in the old cowboy's chest, something he had long thought dead. In time, Buck noticed Tom, the elder boy's interest in hunting. Something in the boy's posture reminded him of his younger self. And so one morning, Buck took him along to check the traps. They hardly spoke, but words were not needed. Tom learned quickly. Soon, Buck was showing him how to read deer tracks. Sarah, meanwhile, took charge of the household, and for the first time in a long time, Buck began to eat with people. Mary, the girl, was no longer afraid of him. She even dared to ask him to tell stories of the Wild West. And Peter, the youngest, was the bravest. He simply walked up to Buck, took his hand, and asked, Are you our new papa now?" Buck froze. Something in his soul broke. The winter grew harsher. One day, returning from a hunt, Buck and Tom were caught in a strong blizzard. Buck, concerned for the boy, truly opened up for the first time. He told Tom about his past, his wife and small son in Texas. That terrible night, their wagon plunged into a ravine, and only he survived. How he had chased a piece he couldn't find ever since Tom said nothing. He simply listened. But when they returned to the cabin, the boy did something Buck hadn't experienced in decades. He hugged him. The cabin was becoming a home. There were Sarah's needlework, Peter's toys. In the evenings, Mary sang songs. One day, sitting together by the fire, Sarah said they would travel on to Oregon in the spring. Buck nodded, but his heart was heavy with dread. "But my dear Rita, if you're expecting a happy ending here, allow me to surprise you." Buck Calloway's past had finally caught up to him, and it did so in the most terrifying way. 3 days later, 2 riders appeared. Dan and Bill McCready, bounty hunter brothers from Texas. They weren't looking for Buck under the law, but for revenge. Their father, shot by Buck years ago, though it was self-defense, had been an idol to them. An icy fear pierced Buck. He was afraid not for himself, but for Sarah and the children. He took his rifle. "Stay inside," he ordered, and stepped out. The 2 men stood before the cabin. Buck recognized their faces. They were the spitting image of their father. "We've been looking for you a long time, Calloway," Dan McCready said. "Time to pay for our father's death." Buck saw Bill ready to draw his weapon. This wouldn't be a fair fight. They would attack treacherously. Buck decided to lead them away from the cabin, but before he could step forward, the door swung open. There stood Tom. He was holding Buck's rifle. "Leave him alone," the boy shouted in a trembling yet firm voice. Bill McCready sneered. "Look at that, Dan. Calloway's got a son. An eye for an eye, wouldn't you say?" Buck instantly understood their intent and lunged forward, covering Tom with his body. The first shot rang out. The bullet buried itself in Buck's shoulder, but he was already flying at Bill, knocking him down with a powerful blow. Dan drew his pistol, but then Tom's shot rang out. The boy missed, but it distracted Dan. That was enough. Buck drew his weapon and did what he hadn't wanted to do. He spilled more McCready blood. The echo of the shot died away among the mountains. Dan lay in the snow. Bill, looking in horror at his brother, leaped onto his horse and galloped away. Buck knew Bill McCready would return, and he wouldn't be alone. That night, Buck told Sarah and the children the entire truth. He didn't sugarcoat anything. Sarah listened in silence. "The man I know," she said, "is the one who saved us from the storm, who teaches my son and tells stories to my daughter. That man is a good man." She walked up to him, gently lifted his chin so he would look her in the eyes. "We aren't going to Oregon," Sarah said. "Not unless you come with us." Buck was stunned. "That's madness, Sarah. I'm a dangerous man. I can't put you in such peril." Sarah smiled. "You're too late, Buck Calloway. We're already a family." For the first time in 25 years, the single thought of family made Buck's head spin. However, Bill McCready's promise was not an empty threat. 2 weeks later, Buck saw them. 11 riders approached the valley. Bill had returned with an entire gang. Buck took off his hat and placed his rifle on the table. Sarah and the children were still asleep. He took a piece of paper and wrote a note with difficulty. He placed it next to Sarah on the bed. Then he went outside, letting the cold wind hit his face. He remembered the laughter, Mary's songs, Peter's hugs, Tom's proud gaze. He closed the door behind him and headed into the valley. The note held just 3 words: "I'll be back for you." Did Buck Calloway return? Did revenge or hope win that cold winter morning? Well, that is a story I will tell next time. I will reveal just one thing. Bill McCready never returned to the mountains.